What they didn't teach you about in school. The shocking brutalities of European colonialism. European colonialism has been a troubled one across centuries. This colonialism has been disturbing since ages, as seen with Europeans maltreating blacks till today was marked with a lot of exploitation, violence, and very harsh punishment, putting Africans at the detriment to become white slaves for their entire lives. Africans have always been suppressed by Europeans and massively destroyed internally, as seen where African values have totally been destroyed, humiliated, and critiqued, leaving African as a dark continent meant for the nourishment and breeding of slaves. With this, Africa's and black skin-colored people are generally seen as slaves. Across the globe, from America to Africa's, Asia to the Pacific, colonialism was widely spread across territories in search of slave power and influence, which has greatly inflicted pain in the minds and heart of indigenous blacks. The European colonial empire, beginning from the Spanish to the British, French to the German, and Belgium to Italian, was greatly felt because of the atrocities which has impacted civilization today negatively, and these atrocities are seen as crimes against humanities worldwide. So we are exposing the bitter and hidden truth about the European colonialism, giving respect to the suffering of the past, honoring the memories of important people who were long in the past. So please like and share, subscribe to this video for more updates on Black liberation. Colonialism by the British, 15th to 20th century. Political dominance, economic exploitation of raw materials, the creation of racial hierarchies that led to racism, indirect authority through local elites in many areas, and Europeans' aggressive efforts to promote Western culture and ideals were the characteristics of this age. Indirect British dominance resulted from their cultural assimilation of indigenous inhabitants, which caused substantial and vast cultural variances based on the particular colony and period of reign. The bulk of Africans were driven from their homes, chained, and forced into slavery. During the pivotal era of British colonization, which lasted from the 16th to the 19th century, Africans were treated harshly during this time, and some were publicly humiliated for attempting to resist persecution, demonstrating that they had no right to free expression, because they were parked as processed consumable sardines. Their conditions upon leaving slave ships were exceedingly difficult. The majority of them who attempted to resist were slung into the deep sea, where their lives ended, since most people would rather be treated like slaves than lose their lives. Most of them were intimidated and made to keep quiet. However, after enduring this extremely harsh treatment in the hope that it would eventually end, it greatly worsened, as evidenced by the fact that they were all forced to work for the state as national workers at no pay. Without a fear of God or the existence of other living things, they were denied their human rights and subjected to unspeakable violence. Black people were viewed as trash who should work hard in adverse situations. During the transatlantic slave trade, ship captains exploited all women on the high seas, as evidenced by their use as toys in public, especially to appease high-ranking officials. These women were viciously sexually assaulted in front of their spouses. All expectant mothers were compelled to appease all high-ranking officials and make the trip to a non-returnable place. Due to extremely adverse circumstances, the majority of these pregnant women perished at sea, and some passed away after giving birth, and the majority of the newborns also perished. We must use caution when extrapolating the experiences of colonizers and colonized women, because the lives of women under imperialism varied over the world. India came to be seen as the British Empire's jewel in the crown. India emerged as the quintessential colonized country, with particularly severe repercussions for women upon its independence. What effects did imperialism have on women? Promoting the notion that they were rescuing indigenous women from the oppression and enslavement they endured at the hands of indigenous males was one way the British legitimized their colonization efforts worldwide. but particularly in India. The British asserted that they would significantly improve the lives of women by converting indigenous populations to Christianity, putting an end to customs, and teaching them the British way of life. Even though many of these rules appeared to be progressive, they supported the British colonial narrative that Indians were wicked barbarians and that colonization was required to save their souls and bring them into the modern world. Therefore, in order to further their own political objectives, British missionaries and officials deliberately overstated the significance and frequency of such customs. As illustrations of these savage patriarchal customs, the British highlighted child marriage and suttee in India, for instance. When a widow willingly, or not, as the British alleged, throws herself onto her late husband's funeral pyre and is incinerated with him, it is referred to as suttee. In an effort to demonstrate their support for indigenous women, the British overstated the practice's popularity and enacted laws outlawing it, even though suttee was not commonly practiced throughout India or accepted by all Hindus. Additionally, they increased the age of consent in India from 12 to 16 and implemented legislation prohibiting child marriage. The British also halted the Devadasi tradition in South India, when young girls were donated to a temple to serve the goddess, but they frequently ended up as prostitutes for the village men and priests. Women from higher social classes were discouraged from pursuing further education beyond Bible study and were urged to focus only on being husbands and mothers. Britain persecuted suffragettes and forced them to eat in British prisons for having the audacity to demand the right to vote while fighting wars in the guise of defending Indian women. British women had few legal rights of any kind, including child custody, and were viewed as their husband's property. British women felt little power or control over their own lives, despite their efforts to uplift and liberate Muslim and Hindu women in India. This is paradoxical, as Queen Victoria, one of the most powerful individuals in the world, ruled England for 63 years, from 1837 to 1901. Britain and France in particular aspired to dominate labor and land over most of sub-Saharan Africa in pursuit of raw minerals that could power industrializing Europe, while killing Africans. This had long-term effects on the environment. Women in West Africa were economically independent, engaged in local trade and marketplaces, tended to their own fields, and had positions as senior wives and mothers. These gendered rights were not respected by colonists. African men were compelled to work as wage laborers or in cash crop agriculture during colonial authority, with males working for pay and women for subsistence. Men and women started to lead distinct lives and create distinct societies. Households were now headed by women. King Leopold II of Belgium, Queen Victoria's cousin, treated the Congolese in the nation he claimed as his own personal property, now known as the Democratic Republic of Congo, in what is arguably the most horrifying example of European treatment of Africans. He took resources from the Congo, including rubber, using slave labor. Individuals who failed to make enough rubber were either killed or disfigured. Between 1885 until 1908, he ruled the Congo Free State, causing an estimated 10 million Congolese to perish. The term crime against humanity was coined in 1890 by George Washington Williams, an African-American journalist, author, and member of the Ohio House of Assembly who visited the Free State in the 1880s and wrote an open letter to Leopold detailing the injustices. The horrors were captured on camera by English missionary and documentary photographer Alice Seeley Harris in the early 1900s. She submitted her images to anti-slavery journals. Leopold gave up personal control of the issue as a result of the political fallout. All colonized women were subjugated by colonialism. However, the methods in which these women experienced colonialism varied depending in part on their class and status. In addition to Being exploited by colonial regimes of power, some colonized women actively participated in imperialism. Women were either beneficiaries or collaborators at other eras. According to some academics, new educational paradigms that encouraged literacy, collectivization, and interaction with men occasionally benefited privileged women in colonial settings. With their newfound abilities, women were frequently able to publish opinions, start journals, make petitions, and question both domestic and international authority. Elite colonial women occasionally used the chances provided by outside interference to form social affinity groups, political committees, and/or support groups for male organizations. As they looked for unity and influence in their individual fields, they were able to organize, educate, and mobilize one another despite not being able to vote or run for government. Having a voice in the public arena, where male authority was concentrated in formal politics and business, was a new experience for many. Women participated in the nationalist movement and battled with males for India's independence in both India and Britain. Indian women like Gulab Kaur led armies against invading powers from the early days of imperialism. The last Sikh emperor's mother, Jind Kaur, became so problematic for the British that they had her imprisoned. Despite growing up in Britain in Queen Victoria's court, her granddaughter Sophia Duleep Singh dedicated her life to promoting women's rights and Indian independence in both India and Britain. Women who advocated for the end of British rule in India, including Sarojini Naidu and Ismat Chugtai, published poetry and pamphlets. Others, including Kasturba Gandhi and Rutai Jinnah, entered politics to try to change the ultimate independence for which their husbands would receive all the praise. One of the leaders of the 1857 Indian Rebellion was Lakshmibai, the Rani of Jhansi. She supported the uprising by using her position as a widow of the late ruler, who was only in her 20s. In an attempt to bribe her into leaving with the wealth of money, the British overlords chose to annex her state. She joined the Indian insurgents and later became their leader. A garrison of British soldiers, along with their spouses and kids, were killed by Lakshmibai's forces.